Welcome back, everybody. This is not your daily update on the Malazan Empire. That's going to come later. This is an additional video, bonus content. Hail! Ain't that fun? Anyway, so here's the thing. I made this video on Saturday about brokenness and what Malazan gets right with broken characters. And I got a lot of responses, actually. It led to me reaching the magical number of 200 subscribers. I'm really, really thankful for that. And a lot of people commented on it, a lot of people shared it, and there's a lot of insightful comments there. And I felt humbled by all of this, and I was thinking about how to respond to all these individual comments. And then I figured I'd just do a video and address these things because I started thinking more. And then I talked a bit with Iska Jarek on his Discord server on the matter. And then I just decided, yeah, fuck it. I'm going to do a second video where I ramble more on the subject on a more philosophical, political, and so forth level. So there's going to be very, very little Malazan stuff in this. It's gonna be mostly, so it's gonna basically be spoiler free, and if you have not even watched, not even read the Malazan Book of the Fall, you might still get something out of this. I'm not sure how often I'll do stuff like this, but I felt today it makes sense to do it this way. So let's go to it. Cheers. So, yeah. First of all, I want to thank both Claudia and Steven Erickson for sharing the video and giving extremely insightful commentaries on this. Claudia's comment hit me like on a more emotional level, and there's a lot of stuff that got me thinking in Steven Erickson's comment. I'm really, really thankful for both of those and for all the other comments I got. I'm just like really humbled by all of this because, frankly, I didn't think much about starting doing this video because I'm an idiot. And basically, I just switched on my camera and like, shit, I have to go in like an hour. I need to record my video if I actually want to do a video on Saturday. So I sat down, switched on the camera, and had up to that point I had like two ideas that I thought I could maybe ramble about for a couple of minutes. And literally in the moment when I switched on the camera, I decided to go with this one. So they didn't go a lot of like forethought into that. And the amount of like, and the comments I got on this and the response I got for this is something where I felt almost a bit like I've cheated my way into this because I didn't, do a lot of research, a lot of thinking, planning, or whatever, scripting, nothing like that. And then I felt that some of the points I tried to make in my stumbling way were then like put much clearer in a way by other people, especially by Claudia. And I'm not gonna even try to pronounce that surname because I don't want to butcher it. But anyway, there was some very interesting stuff in there that I felt like emotionally really touched me. Now I want to go into like two things that I feel spring from what I talked about there about brokenness and about compassion and so forth. And I feel that on the one hand, I want to look a bit closer at why it is that a lot of people, me included, I'm not going to exclude me here, why it is so hard to give compassion and not expect something in return. That's the one thing I think we should talk about. And the other thing is why it is so very difficult for us as humans to maybe, it's a small theory, why it is very difficult for us as humans to accept the fact that we might have a problem with giving empathy and compassion without expecting something in return. Now, obviously, I'm not saying that no one is able to be a complete altruist, is able to be compassionate and give compassion without expecting anything in return. That's obviously not true. There's people out there who can do this, I'm pretty sure. It's also the case that this is not like these are not black and white absolute cases. Sometimes we are able to do this, and sometimes it gets more difficult. And there plays a lot in there that also, yeah, once again, like Claudia said, like when people when you give compassion and try to love, because it boils down to love in a lot of cases, it boils down to love. When you open yourself and give compassion to someone who is broken and who is not responding in the way you expect, but is maybe actually hurting you with his or her response, and there is that point where sort of self protection and things like that set in, and you distance yourself because you're not able to do that entire like full embrace forever and ever and ever. And to look at Malazan real quick, we see a character who does that, and we see what happens when he does that in the arc of Itkovian and the Redeemer. And I'll touch back on that, I suspect, maybe in the future after, like, once I'm back through Toll the Hounds. But what I would say here is the fact that Itkovian does not survive as a human being after giving absolute compassion and the embrace to the Tilan Imas. He is overwhelmed by that, and that kills him. And there's a message in there as well. And on the other hand, he becomes he becomes sort of divine afterwards. I'm not going to go into that at this point because I want to reread the Redeemer stuff in Toll the Hounds. Anyway, so there's that already, and it's not that we should, condemn people for not doing that. So I just wanted to have that out of the way. There's reasons why we do these things, and they are not to be judged at all. But now let's look at why I believe that we as humans, at least from with a background in a Western civilization, at least, tend to connect the idea of giving compassion with that expectation of change or whatever in the person that we are compassionate with. And I believe that this is one of those political, societal, and so forth issues. So strap in. This is going to be a bit more philosophical and political at this point. All right. To be clear, I don't think that when we are compassionate and then get not the response that we expected, or don't get thanked or see change or whatever in the person, I don't think that, like at least most people, when we are compassionate and do that and open ourselves to that other person, we don't explicitly, consciously expect change. We don't do that consciously. I rather think for a lot of people, this is a subconscious thing. It's a subconscious thing. I believe the reason for that lies within our overall society. The thing I'm trying to get at here is that at least Western civilization for a long, long time has been basically about exchange of goods, services, and other things. It's a very much contract-based society. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, and there's a lot of philosophical arguments why it is important to have these kind of things, like this basic trust in the validity of contracts. That's not what I'm getting at. It's like, that basic thing, pacta sunt servanda, that Roman basis of law. It's like contracts are to be kept. That's something that is vital for the functioning of any kind of human society, in a way. Because if that breaks down, all trust breaks down. The problem, I fear, comes in a twofold way later on with like early modernity mostly. Now, I'm not going to say that I don't think that the early modern age, the Enlightenment, and so forth weren't a really, really important and good move. I'm just saying there are side effects to these things, and that's where we're coming from. What do I mean? I mean that from the 16th century onward, with people like Bacon, Francis Bacon, you have this drive that underpins the entire idea of the Enlightenment in a way, and of the scientific look at the world, is to find rules to how our world works. Now that's good. The problem is, once we have rules, we expect those rules to work, and we expect we gain a fundamental trust in those scientific rules that underpin the universe. And there's stuff where that works better, and there's stuff where that doesn't work as well. What I mean by this is that when we come to the outside world, to what you might call physics and stuff like that, the rule thing is rather clear. And that's another thing. It's like you read someone like Bacon, and he goes out, is very open about the fact that he believes that the end goal of knowing the rules of how the universe works is to then use those rules to our advantage and do exactly and yeah, we use that to then rule the universe. It's basically a more scientific and more scientific and more direct way of following that thing that you see in the Bible when God says to Adam that he should take control of the world. It's basically the same thing, but in a more mechanical way to look at it. It's like we find out where the levers for the universe are, so we can push those levers to our advantage. That's the goal behind it, and that works in a way largely to our advantage as a species. We get progress, we get better health, we get all these things that make our lives longer, hopefully better, and so forth. I'm not taking that away. I'm just saying that where those rules work rather well within the physical sphere, it gets more complicated when we enter the realm of the mind and soul. And I don't want to get into like a full-on discussion on whether our brains is like everything, or if there's a soul or not. That's not my point here. The point, because at the end of the day, we don't know enough about our minds and about our brains at this point to understand them. So the whole idea of rules working there doesn't come into it, because we don't understand ourselves well enough. And let no neurologists tell you otherwise. We don't understand how our fucking brains work, because if we would, we would be able to fix a lot of stuff, which is my problem there, right? Where I feel we come to that point that I was trying to get at. So yeah, we believe in the fact that we know the rules of the universe, and we know how to use those rules, and that they are sort of unalterable. And we believe that also covers human behavior to a point. We don't explicitly believe that. I mean, some people do, but most of us don't, go out and formulate a theory of free will versus predestination or other things like that. We don't do that unless we get paid for it or are philosophers, which is a small subset of human beings so far. And so this is a subconscious thing, but we kind of believe that human behavior follows certain rules as well. So what we have at this point is basically we have the general idea of contracts underpinning a lot of society, and that's a good thing. We have the next thing is we start believing that human lives and human behavior follows sort of fixed rules, because we have learned through the decades, through the centuries, that that the universe in general follows rules. That's that whole point when we start losing faith in gods, because suddenly we have more scientific explanations for how the world works. We don't need Thor, or we don't need Zeus throwing down thunderbolts anymore once we figure out how lightning works. and so forth. And from that fact that we figure out that we can explain these things, this other thing, the idea that human behavior also follows rules that are sort of predictable and trustworthy, is also established over time. And once again, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of human behavior follows patterns and rules. That's true. The problem here is, the process here is that those things, from being something we are consciously aware, slowly seep down into our subconscious minds, into, as it were, our souls. And once again, I'm not arguing whether there are souls or not. I'm just using the word here. Into our souls. We don't think about that kind of thing. We just act accordingly, according to to that feeling. Like we subconsciously expect people to follow rules. And one of those rules is that contracts are important, and that contracts are to be honored. That's basically one of those rules. It's also a rule that is so deeply ingrained in human society and human behavior at this point, that we also don't think about it most of the time. We just assume this will be the case. We just expect it to be the case, and that's fine. So why do I say this is where it becomes problematic? It becomes problematic with the rise of what you might call capitalism, or the commodification of things in general. Everything becomes sort of commodified. We suddenly not only barter for, I don't know, foodstuffs and shit like that, we start to sell services. We start to sell all these other things, and the exchange of goods and services is something that also like seeps into our expectations and into the way we feel and think. It's something, that's where I said mostly something from a more Western perspective, because obviously I don't know any other. I suspect it might be different in other societies. And my point is that with the rise of a more abstract economy, and this economy and the ideas of that you can vaguely call capitalism, with those becoming dominant in Western society, we start to apply this idea to a lot of other interactions as well. The idea that that every human action requires the exchange of something and requires something in return, is something that's from like, your business life, slowly takes over other parts of our lives. Once again, this is not always a conscious thing. It's probably most of the time, I think, it's not a conscious thing. It's a subconscious thing. And what happens is that we start commodifying emotions as well. Or the showing of emotions as well. It's like we show an emotion, we kind of subconsciously expect the party that we show that emotion to react in a way. We show love to someone, we expect them to love us back, which is obviously the point where the rejection of love stings and hurts so much, because we feel betrayed in a way. And it's the same with showing compassion. We don't think about it. It's like, I show compassion to a broken person, they will so much appreciate it. And if they're able to, either they'll be super thankful, or they'll actually change their ways. Either way, I get something out of showing compassion. This underlies the thinking, I believe, could be an explanation there. Because we commodify all these things. Once again, I believe the problem there lies in things that are very dominant in our society, slowly seeping into our subconscious and into our soul, as it were. And I believe that's the point why is one possible explanation why it is that we find it so very, very difficult, and so very difficult to show compassion and empathy without expecting anything in return. And once again, we don't expect these things explicitly. We kind of subconsciously expect this return kind of thing. And at this point, it requires us to consciously decide to show compassion without expecting anything, which we can do. It's a struggle. And that's the point where, for example, the Malazan Book of the Fallen comes in so powerfully, because it shows us that deciding consciously to show compassion and not expect anything in return, to not judge and just show compassion, has value in itself, and is an important aspect of us being human. So that's my main point here. I don't want to say capitalism is to blame for everything. I'm just saying that the way Western society over time developed into this very rules driven exchange of goods and services and everything, exchange based society has could have led to us also subconsciously viewing the showing of emotions or the showing of compassion as something of an exchange, and we expect that contract. We expect that contract of I show compassion, you show me thankfulness, or change your ways. When we start this interaction, we expect it to be a contract that needs to be served, and if that contract is not served, we feel outrage and we feel anguish. And that's one way to look at why I feel this is so difficult to show that compassion. And now I want to look at why I feel or have the I am of the impression that it is problematic or can be difficult for some people to accept that showing compassion without expecting anything in return is something that is very difficult and does not come very natural to us at this point. This is maybe another more contentious point, because I'm gonna blame religion. All right, so to make it clear, the idea of showing unconditional compassion without expecting anything in return is a very, very core tenet, if maybe not the one core tenet that Christianity brought to the table when it came to religion. It's like the idea of love thine enemy as love that, and so forth. Love thine enemy is that one thing that you get from Christianity compared to stuff that you can find in the Old Testament. It's that one thing that makes that one invention that makes Christianity something else than a just slightly reformed Judaism. And thus, it is something that people who conceive of themselves as religious people hold as one of their core tenets. It's like, whether you actually do that or not is not so much the question here. The point here is that if someone tells you you're not doing it, you not only need to reevaluate your own moral behavior, but also that part of your identity that you or we think of as Christians. Well, I don't do that, but that's a different thing. Think as Christians, so it attacks us on two fronts, and that's a highly problematic thing. I mean, the solution is to just go out and say and actually consciously decide to live that compassion and give out that compassion, but that's difficult. It's really difficult to always make that conscious decision to do that. It's an uphill struggle all the fucking way. It's like Sisyphus, it's basically that Sisyphus thing. And I'm not going to go on a tangent here, but that's why it is so difficult to show that compassion. We are all able of doing that, but we need to consciously decide. And we often don't do that because there's reasons for that. We often just, don't have the energy, don't think about it, because a lot of our daily interactions are basically done on autopilot in a way. And if we then confront ourselves and realize that we have not shown that compassion without judging, without expecting anything in return, and we all do that from time to time, we then not only feel shitty for not being a nice person and we start feeling like we are dicks. No, we also start feeling like we might not be a good Christian if we define ourselves as a Christian. That's that's that other point, and I feel that might just be one of the reasons why it comes so hard and so difficult for us to actually accept the fact that oftentimes we don't show compassion, and to confront that in ourselves is so difficult, and we start to argue about it, start to become argumentative about it. So that's that other point that I was trying to make there. So I'm not trying to bash religion here. I'm just saying it's a very natural thing that our society, our capitalist, scientific society, Western society, has led us into the point where we kind of expect an exchange and expect something in return for showing compassion subconsciously. And once we realize that, this attacks our religious identity if we identify ourselves as Christians. And well, that's not a pleasant place to be, right? For like, not a pleasant, mind space to be in. So I don't know. Anyway, that's basically me preaching to you on moral philosophy and the evils of capitalism as they pertain to to our emotional well-being. I hope you took something out of this, and if you want to argue further with me, then please go ahead and put it in the comments. Once again, I thank you all for subscribing. 200 is more than I ever expected. I once again really want to thank Stephen Erickson for commenting, giving such a long, insightful comment, for sharing the video, and the same for Claudia for both sharing and commenting. I'm very, very thankful for these insights. And yeah, I'll see you later with that update on House of Chains. Until then, cheers.